Hey everyone, welcome to Headspace Live. We are back with our weekly stream. And today I have with me the remarkable John Burke, pastor, author of Imagine the God of Heaven, Near Death Experiences, God's Revelation, and the Love You've Always Wanted. I'm very excited about this conversation because on the surface, it might not even connect to the things that we talk about it here every week, which is how do we flourish, how do we show up, how we have impact in the world. It seems like this ethereal, otherworldly thing, quite literally, but there's a direct connection between that and how we show up every day in life, in work. I'm very, very excited to get into all kinds of rabbit holes with John in just a second. Leave us our comments, questions. We try to answer every single one of them. Here we go. All right, John, thanks for
Hey,
joining me.
Christian. Oh, great to be here.
Oh, so we've known each other for a little bit of time at a distance. We've exchanged emails and calls and everything. And you just told me, you give me an update on your Spanish learning skills, which I admire tremendously, being a multilingual guy. How's that going?
Well, durante COVID mi objetivo fue aprendiendo español.
El español.
Yeah.
Muy bien, John. That's fantastic. So impressive. So today we're here to talk about your new book, and I love the books that you've written before. I've actually spoken on some of them. Not the last one. I haven't read it yet, but I know that it's essentially along the same continuum, right? The title is Near Death Experiences, the subtitle, Near Death Experiences, God's Revelation, and the Love You've Always Wanted, which is a really cool way to capture it. And I guess my first question is this: how can something so ethereal, something that we perceive as disconnected from reality, even for
Mm,
those of us who are spiritual people, it feels that way, right?
yeah.
And it's which is a strange thing to even say, right? If you're a Christian, if you're a person of faith, as I am, think about it all the time. When you just go there in more detail, more granularly, it feels scary and disconnected. And who knows anything about this? That's basically how it feels like. So my question is this: how can thinking of what happens after death inform how we build our lives day to day today?
It's a giant question.
It is a giant. It's an umbrella question.
I know. Well, and let me start by saying, I came at this as a skeptic,
Did
literally
you?
an agnostic. I didn't believe in Jesus. I thought he was a legend.
Mm.
And someone gave my dad the first research on near death experiences when he was dying of cancer.
Wow.
And I saw the book on his bedside table and read it in one night. And I said, oh my gosh, like this could be actual evidence that this God, Jesus,
Mm.
soul lives on stuff is real. Now I wasn't convinced, but it opened my mind. And I later I started reading, studying the Bible. I came to faith. I was an engineer. So I worked as an engineer. I've always had a very analytical, skeptical, like, how does it work? And how do you know and prove it kind of mind. Um, so literally the last 35 years, I have studied well over 1,000 of these near-death experience cases where people clinically die. They have no heartbeat, they have no brain waves, and yet they come back, they're resuscitated or miraculously revived after minutes, sometimes hours, and they talk about the same things and the same things all around the world. Literally, that they experienced a life more real than this one in a place more beautiful than Earth has ever been, relational reunions, and in the presence of this God of light and love who was personal and knew them intimately. And here's where we'll tie it in, is that he often gives them a life review.
He
Time
does.
works differently on the other side. And all these things are commonalities of what they say. Time works differently. So they literally relive their lives from the perspective of what really matters. And it's fascinating. And so, yeah, so how does it tie in? Well, it completely ties in. It's kind of like, um, you're rushing through life and running through life trying to succeed, but what's the goal? You know, I mean, are you aiming at the right target? And that really, I think, is what this has to offer.
You know, I was speaking to someone, one of my guests, who was an expert. It's sort of it's an adjacent disconnect, I think. His name is Joe Beam. He's a marriage expert. So we're talking about relationships and how relationships and marriage and love doesn't often doesn't factor into creating a successful career and following your calling. And we sort of noticed that this gap that we pursue and we're driven to do things because we lack love, because we're sometimes scared, because we want to prove our grandpa wrong or something like that. And it seems to me what you're saying is essentially the meta version of that, right?
Yeah.
The
Oh,
meta version
absolutely.
of that is that we are put on earth to live, to love, to worship, to serve, and we get lost along the way through trauma, through wounds, through our own faults and mistakes and sins.
Our own
And we,
choices. Yeah.
yeah, and we make these decisions. Are the things that drive us are the wrong things, and makes us miserable. And don't you think? So let me ask you this: how do you make that connection? You go, oh, I'm I'm motivated by the wrong things. Let me replace it with the right things. And what is it that I'm replacing it with? And then
Yeah.
how does that influence what I do then, day to day, hour to hour?
Well, that's not simple. I mean,
Right.
I look back on my own life, and even after moving from engineering into pastoral ministry, I look back now, and there were a lot of years of my life that I call it running on bad fuel.
Right.
I was
Wow.
running,
Yep.
but it was bad fuel, and it left a lot of junk in the tank. It's like after a while it gets all clogged up. I'll tell you a quick little story of so in answer to your question, I think yes, Jesus made it really clear. Like, the purpose of everything is to love God first and follow him, so that we love people with all that we've been given, with all the time, with
That's
the
simple. Yeah.
gifts,
Hmm.
with the work, with the creativity, with the platforms, with everything. And it really is that simple. But you're absolutely right that none of us get out unscathed. This is a broken world that is disconnected from God's will and ways. It doesn't always go God's will and ways. That's why Jesus taught us to pray, "Your will be done on earth
That's
as it
right.
is in
Yeah.
heaven," because it's not on earth. So it starts with a willingness to really seek God to show us. And sometimes he tries to get our attention. So for me, and I'm talking about back when I'd left engineering. I was now in ministry. I was doing, really well. I mean, what does that even mean? Doing really well in ministry.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But you can just take the same mentality and
That's
shift it.
right.
And
Yeah.
I was a musician, so I was trying to record an album. I was trying to write a book. I was leading a management team with 300 staff at the age of 29. It's crazy. And I was working on a master's degree all at the same time.
Yeah,
All right.
that is doing well. I think officially for most people, they would look at that and go, "This guy's doing well."
Exactly. And I had a 3-year-old daughter, my little daughter Ashley, and I wanted to be a good father. Okay.
Mm.
I really wanted to be a good father. And I'm down on the ground playing Barbies with her one day. And I'm doing the Barbie with her, but I'm really studying for a test. And she stops me and looks me in the eye and said, "Daddy, you're not playing right."
Oh,
3.
wow.
Now, Christian, it went to my soul, because I knew
Yep.
in that moment, it was like God was saying, "You're not fooling anybody but yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You say
Mm-hmm.
you want to be a good father, but you're not going to be unless you seek me on this."
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
But now to say that was all it took, no.
No, of course
We're
not.
talking years, but it was the beginning. And I did. And I was in a men's group where I began to open up. It was a really safe group to share everything, your sins, your struggles, your highs and lows. And I started sharing about this, and they started asking me questions like, well, because my question was, why do I always live out in the future, conquering the next mountain? It's like,
Exactly. Exactly.
and why do I always redline? Like if this is the red line, I'm always like right up here where it's screaming,
Oh my
right?
gosh. Yes, yes.
But here's the harder part is if you had asked me, you know, well, and these guys did, they said, well, okay, success. I'm going to succeed. That drove me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, what if you don't? And I was like, well, that's not an option.
Yep. You're
Like
driven.
literally.
You're driven. You are driven. You're self-driven.
But I did not know why.
You don't
And
know why.
that's the
Yeah.
key. And they started asking me questions like, well, did you feel like you had to prove yourself to your dad, like prove to earn his love or your mom's love? And I was like, no, not at all. Like, and they didn't. I knew they loved me. They believed in me. They like,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to do great things and blah, blah, blah. Well, so it didn't make sense. And for 2 years, I was seeking God on this. And I was
Interesting.
just, and I even went into some counseling, just to try to do everything I could to explore, to be self-reflective before God. And
I think
2 years later,
I think you gave us a lot of value. I'm sorry to interrupt, because for those of us listening to this, I think what I hear very, very valuable is this: pay attention. Like your daughter telling me you're not playing right. If you just dismiss that, you would have missed a huge opportunity, because that was a thing, right? It was a trigger for awareness. And there's others coming your way. Obviously, if you don't listen to the first one, you'll get 100 more. And then the other thing that you mentioned was remarkable is that looking for a group of people who can speak into your life and you feel perfectly safe with, and they can ask questions without judgment per se, but just being
yeah,
on your side, coming
yeah,
alongside and asking these questions. And even if the questions don't have an answer per se, you're asking the questions. And I
that's
think
part of it.
and I think
Is
that's
you,
huge. I think
yeah.
that's huge. Yeah.
And so, 2 years later, I was doing I was at the funeral of my grandmother on my dad's side. Now, my dad died, you know, uh, 30, 40 years ago. And this is my grandmother, his mom, and I'm talking to his sister, and she is my only relative on my dad's side that's left. And I realized, as I'm preparing to say some things at my grandmother's funeral, I don't even know my grandfather's name.
Oh wow.
Now, it never connected, like,
Oh wow.
but I
Yeah.
didn't even know his name. Right. And what I did know about him is that my dad could not stand him.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
growing up, my dad he'd have me out working, and he'd say to me things like, you're going to know the value of hard work, and you're not going to be a bum. And if he ever saw someone that he thought was a bum,
Mm-hmm.
he would get visibly angry and say, my son is not going to be like that. Okay.
Okay.
So there
Mm-hmm.
were some messages like that, but it didn't connect until I asked his sister at my grandmother's funeral, what was my granddad like? And this otherwise happy, jolly, wonderful woman gets visibly angry and said he was a bum.
Oh wow.
Exact words.
Exact words.
Exact words. And it was like the Holy Spirit pulled the curtain back and went, there it is.
There it is.
There it
That's the
is.
bad fuel. That is the bad
And
fuel.
and it was so subconscious, Christian. And that's the tricky part. The tricky part is if you're not humbly willing to seek and hear, you won't find.
Oh,
And but
this
but
is so
God
good.
did show me, and what He showed me is that my dad and mom, they did love me, they did believe in me, But my dad's hatred and hurt that had never been healed, that he did not seek God to heal and
Hmm.
forgive his father, was like bad fuel that transferred to me
Yes.
subconsciously.
Yes, of course,
And
of
so
course.
I knew I was loved unless, what
That's
if I'm
right.
a bum?
Hmm. It
Well,
was so
then you're,
similar. It was so similar to me in that way that I have three generations of broken homes. So family was this pain point,
mm,
this agony, right? And I, on the surface, I was very confident and driven, and I realized much later that I, and I think part of it was that, part of it was just moving around when I was a kid and not fitting in, being an outsider, is that I pursued a career in show business as a singer because I wanted to guarantee love,
mhm.
and I would do anything to achieve that. And
You're wanted, you're sought after,
exactly,
you're
exactly.
valuable.
And
Mhm.
of course, when you get there and you start, moving millions and selling millions of albums and playing sports arenas, you realize doesn't quite work that way. So it's bad fuel. It's bad fuel, and then it
Yeah.
informs the way you do things. And if you don't switch to good fuel, even the achievements that you have, they are empty. They make you miserable.
Well, and they might make you feel good, and that's even worse because you're leaving wreckage
That's
behind
right.
you.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So my bad fuel worked really well.
It's very effective. Yes, it is.
It's
In the short
very
run, it's very effective.
in the way the world measures success. You do get the external. The problem is you're missing what if the heart matters most.
That's right. Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
And I wanted to say that what you just mentioned, to note that you mentioned it in passing, but I think we do a lot of it. What we do is from this, sort of these subconscious, strange bad fuel drivers. But the world rewards certain things, so we are affirmed, rewarded with on external things, on short term things. And then so we double down on those things because we're
Right,
rewarded. Every signal we get is mostly that. Very We get very few signals that would be the signal of your friend saying, so what is this exactly, what is it
right.
that you're above the red line all the time, and what happens if you fail? Those signals are almost never there unless you are aware of them, unless you seek them. And I think what you're telling us is incredibly valuable for anyone who's driven to just create systems and practices for awareness, and also put themselves in environments where people can speak into their lives.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's not easy though, because
It's not. Yeah.
what you have to realize is that you are testing and you're challenging the very thing you've counted on to give you what you need the most.
That's right.
Love, acceptance, value, identity,
Hmm.
worth. And the problem is it's a straw house.
It is. Yeah.
It's not going to stand the test of time and the storms of life. And what God wants to do when we're willing is to begin to take that down so that he can build something from the inside that's truly strong,
Yeah.
because that props us up for a while, but it's not going to last.
It does not. It does not. And that's so what I see I see that over and over again when I work with professionals in my coaching program is so many of most of them. Okay, honestly, all of us who are driven, there's always something there that is foundational and wonderful. We're here to gift the world, but then there's
Yeah,
bad fuel as well. And switching from bad fuel to good fuel. And I love that you brought up that term. It's a great term. I'm going to steal it from you.
absolutely.
Is wonderful. And sort of the process. This is why I do coaching, is that I've lived through it. I've walked many people through it, through that
Hmm.
transition, and to see someone switch and then just take off and flourish in ways that they can't even imagine is just one of the most validating things for me.
Well, and warning, first it feels like death,
Oh, it does, right? It's so hard.
because you literally you're dying to self.
Oh, wow.
Yourself
Yeah.
you as yourself has found a way to get your deepest needs met. The problem is it's got to die in
Oh, wow.
order for the identity and the true self that God made you to be to take shape. So then you can use these gifts not out of a need to get, but out of an overflow of confidence
Absolutely.
in
That's a
God's
very good
love, in
point.
your
Yeah.
identity, in what He's given you to share.
It feels like a death. That's a really good insight. That's why so many people back out of things like that. When you like they back out of taking the Bible seriously, church seriously, even with the coaching program, when I say, look, this is going to be a serious matter.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want this? Yes, I do want this. Are you ready to engage? And in the moment they say yes, and they go, and then they back out often. And I know it's fear. I know
Yeah,
that there's a sense of, oh, I'm going to have to put everything on the table
yeah.
and look at it.
And it's, it's really like if you've ever been through, I think it's the Eisenhower Tunnel in Colorado where it goes deep through this mountain and then you come out and it is just this gorgeous,
Yes.
or same thing in Yosemite,
Yes. Yes. I've been in
but,
both places.
but it's like that on a spiritual, psychological level that you have to go into the dark first. And it's not pretty and it's just dark and you wonder, is there going to be light on the other side? Maybe there's not. And so many people, they go, well, at least this is some light over here.
That's
And so
right.
they
Hmm.
stay there,
Hmm.
but you've got to push all the way through to the other side. And what I can really say is true freedom, you
True
know,
freedom. Yes.
true freedom.
And I think what you're exploring for now many years is essentially the ultimate good fuel, right?
Yeah.
It's this is what we were created for this. How do we bridge the gap, die to ourselves, replace bad fuel with good fuel? So can you tell me a few stories, because I know they're amazing. I've watched many of them and read about them. And to me they, you're a person of faith for many years. You lead others. When you read those stories, it still moves you on a level that is just not normal. It's just off the charts faith building.
Hmm. Yeah, and what I'm trying to do in Imagine the God of Heaven is literally show what God's been revealing through the scriptures all along, but through illustrated by 70 people from every continent. Now think about that, every continent. And yet when they encounter God, he's the same God, and he's the same God who's been revealing himself throughout history. And many times in his presence they get a life review and that brings a lot of clarity. So I'll give you a couple of stories like this one, Howard Storm, because his is very insightful. um, he he grew up in a very abusive environment. His dad was emotionally, physically, verbally abusive constantly. It was horrible. And um, and when Howard got older, he said, he turned from every thought of God or church or anything like that, and he was just anti. He was an atheist. He was a tenured college professor and got these accolades and awards. But he told me honestly that he was unfaithful. He was, his whole mantra was the biggest, baddest bear in the woods wins,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yep.
But he was successful, and then he has his duodenum rupture while he's on an art tour in France. And usually, it's like 5 hours and you die. Well, it was the weekend. They couldn't get a surgeon. They couldn't find a surgeon. 8 hours, 9 hours later, he dies. And now he thought when you die, it's just unplug the computer, it's just blank screen. There's nothing. And so he didn't even know he was dead. And as is common with near death experiences, his first thing is he's standing there in the room and he feels wonderful. He
Mm.
feels better than he's ever felt before, not just five senses, but more like 50 senses. And he's, everything is highly vivid, and he has these nice people come in the hallway and say, Howard, come with us. We're here for you. And he thinks it's the hospital staff. Finally, they found a surgeon. They're going to help me. And so he goes with them. And it turns out to be a hellish near-death experience, which by the way, 23% of near-death experiences that have come forward are hellish. You know, there are heavenly ones and there are hellish ones. So you got to make sense of both. And I try to help do that. But he is deceived by these people, and they lead him into this outer darkness, just like Jesus talked about, and they turn on him and they just maul him. And you know, he's multiple times I've interviewed him where he said, I can't go any farther than that because I still have PTSD from it.
Oh, wow.
So this is not a dream. This is not a dream. This is more real, they say, than anything we experience here. And we can talk more about that, but here's the critical thing is in that place. And again, just like Peter said in 2 Peter 3:8, to the Lord, a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years is like a day. Well, they say time doesn't work the same. You know, it's multidimensional. And so they don't know, was this hours or was this years? And
wow, really?
He's there and in the midst of this horrific experience, he hears in his chest, call out to God, pray to God. And he's still, now this is an important, insightful thing. In his pride, even in this horrific place he is, he says, I don't believe in God. I don't pray to God. His ego is still fighting.
Oh my God.
And I know, and he keeps hearing, pray to God. And so he didn't know how to pray, but he just starts piecing together, you know, my country, 'tis of thee, God bless America, anything you could think of with God in it.
Oh, wow.
And these horrific people, he thinks they were people just completely.
So they're people, they're spirits, they're what are they?
He thinks they were his kindred spirits. So his kindred people who were just like him on earth.
Oh,
and
wow.
That's what he was going to devolve into. It was dominate or be dominated, terrorize or be terrorized.
Mm-hmm. It's
the free will gone mad without the restraining force of the Holy Spirit.
That's right. And do you think that whole outer darkness concept, because it's so hard for us to grasp, even those of us who study the Bible, and let alone people that are like your friend who was not even a believer in the first place. What is that? Is that a place of punishment? Is it the absence of God?
No, what he clearly said, and what, you know, one of my favorite writers, C.S. Lewis, also said, is he said, this was God giving the free will creature what he demands. Stay out of my life.
Oh, yeah.
But if God is light and God is love and God is life, and you demand that he stay out, what do you get?
Oh, wow. That's intense.
And that's what he was experiencing. But in the midst of this, so he starts praying and just saying the word God, and they're cussing at him and telling him there is no God, but they were backing off. And then he remembers a song from when he was brought to Sunday school as a little kid, Jesus loves me. Those are the only words they could remember. And he started thinking about it, and he thought, even if Jesus is, why would he love me? Why would he help me? But in his desperation, he just cried out, enough, Jesus, save me. Mm-hmm. And into this darkness comes this brilliant light, brighter than the sun, which is common all around the globe, of this God that is 1,000 times brighter than the sun. But you can look at him, and arms reach out, pick him up, and take him out of that place. Now, he realizes, I was wrong. This is Jesus. And in the presence of Jesus, as Jesus is holding him with these angels, he gets a life review. Okay. And now the life review is, they talk about it in many ways, but to summarize, imagine watching your life relived in a 3D panoramic display where you are feeling and thinking all the things you were feeling and thinking, but you're also feeling and thinking and experiencing what the people that you're interacting with are feeling and thinking too.
You are. Oh wow, that is scary. Okay, I must say.
And every act of kindness, you see how it affected the other. Some saw how it rippled through humanity 10, 20, 30 times, the positive ripple effect through humanity. Um, you feel what your words many times do to others and how it ripples
Oh
from
wow.
them.
Yeah.
It's exactly what Jesus said. When in Matthew 25, when he said, in that day, um, the king will say to them, you know, when you did this for the least of these, when
You,
you
you did
you
it for
gave a
me.
cup of water,
Yeah.
you showed up, and when I was sick, you visited me in prison, all this. Well, when did we do that for you? Well, and he said, when you did it for the least of these, you
Yes.
did
Yeah.
it to me.
And of course, he also
Both,
he also mentions every careless word.
and every careless word. Yeah. And
Wow.
so this is real.
Oh
And
wow.
consistently, these people all across the globe experience it. Now, they also experience the unconditional love and acceptance of God at the same time
As they're getting the review.
as they're getting the review. He
Okay.
does not stop loving them. We are his children. We are all meant to be his children. Even those who reject him, he still loves them like you are the only one he ever created. And this is another amazing thing about God. Perfect parenting would be what God is. You never remove your love, but you also don't deny the consequences of bad actions so that
That's
your
right.
so that your
Hmm.
child doesn't feel separated from your love, but they also realize there are consequences to your actions.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's exactly what the life review is. Now, Howard, in this, so what was fascinating, that comes back around to our point, is that in this life review, he sees, first of all, he said that all the emphasis for him, and it's different for different people, but all the emphasis for him were on relationships. And he's going through his life and he says to Jesus, because he now feels so comfortable in the presence of Jesus, because God is relatable. This is what I'm trying to show in the book too. God is the love you have always wanted. He's the friend you've always wanted. He's the parent you've always wanted or maybe lacked. He's even better than the spouse that you thought was the all in all. I mean,
That's right.
it's wild. But in his presence, he says to Jesus, "Wait a second, you're skipping the most important part of my life. This is when I won Kentucky Artist of the Year and had this big banquet in my honor, and they gave me this big cash prize, and that was the pinnacle of my existence, what I live for."
Oh
And
wow.
Jesus says, "That's not important. I want you to see how you treated the students."
Okay. Interesting.
He was a professor.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And he shows him a time when this student came into his office, and he's an 18-year-old kid, and he's one of his art students, and he's heartbroken because of a breakup. And Howard is reliving this, and he's hearing this kid, but he's also hearing his thoughts again, that they don't pay me enough for this crap. You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
what am I doing? Listen, like, I really care about your love life, and yet the
Exactly.
kid's crying, and he said, what I realized is he actually thought I was kind enough to care about him.
Right. Oh wow. Hmm.
And I didn't. I didn't care at all. And Jesus was showing me, this is what mattered. This is what mattered most.
Wow. That's remarkable.
Now, what he also saw is with his father. And he said, what I realize is I used to think, my father was a bad man, and he was. Um, but I also saw that where I thought I was completely the victim, and Everyone, all these bad people were doing all this stuff to me. It was a two-way street. Because yes, my father was a bad person and he was abusive, but then I turned around and did everything I could to hurt him back and be as rebellious as I could. And it was like this fire that just kept blazing out of control. And Jesus was trying to show me that I needed to take responsibility for me. And again, it comes back to that, whatever happened to us or whatever the past, before God, we can take responsibility of ourselves and we can let him in to begin to lead and guide and heal and replace the bad fuel with good fuel. And that is what Howard came back and did.
Interesting. Did he when you interview those people and you hear the stories, how does that work when it comes to what they see and experience? Is it do they see a human being of flesh and blood? Is it a light of a creature of light, both, a combination? Do you feel like it's a projection that God will manifest itself in a way that we can sort of process, or otherwise we
Are
wouldn't be
you
able to
talking
handle it?
about seeing God?
Yeah, the experience. And is it the presence of God, or is it Jesus, the person? How does that? How do
Yes
people
and
perceive
yes.
those things? I
Yes
guess.
and yes. So it's fascinating, and that's really I'm showing in Imagine the God of Heaven the whole story and history of God and attributes and character and heart of God that's in the scriptures. It's there and it's written in history. But these people from all around the globe are saying the same things. They are illustrating the same thing. So, give you another quick illustration. Rajiv was a chief anesthesiologist at Bakersfield Heart Hospital.
Okay.
Didn't believe that NDEs were a thing, even though he had heard people who come back from anesthesia, or surgery who had died say this happened, and he would give them a shot of antipsychotic drug.
Oh,
And then he had one. He
oh,
had one.
he did.
He had one.
And that's his professional field. So he's literally adjacent to it, basically professionally.
And it's completely changed his life. But initially, he too started out. It's the same generational thing. His father was very abusive. He had become an alcoholic and abusive toward his son, and materialism was all he cared about. And he starts off in a hellish experience as well, cries out to God in repentance, he said. That's his words. And he said these two Christian angels, and that's how he identified them.
He said
Then,
Christian angels. Interesting.
yes, take him to this place of exquisite beauty, of mountains and trees and forests and valleys, but with vibrant colors beyond anything our color spectrum has, and into the presence of this God of light who is, he said, 1,000 suns, like
Oh,
looking into 1,000 suns, but mesmerizing to look into. And in his presence, and the communication is thought to thought, heart to heart, complete, pure.
mm-hmm.
And he said to him, I'm going to send you back. But first, I want you to see your life again to see what needs to change.
Okay.
Okay.
The life review again.
And he
Yes.
sees it again. He sees his life review, and he realizes, and he feels this incredible love and acceptance. And he thought when he saw his life review, he's going to send me back to hell. That's what I deserve.
Yeah.
And instead, he gets this very personal, intimate compassion and love and care. And he said, I had a thought that light was Jesus. Now, later, he encounters the same brilliant God of light, and he says, who are you, Lord? And just like Saul in Acts chapter 9 on the Damascus Road, remember
Yeah.
Saul,
Yeah, of course.
who became Paul, is persecuting Christians. He didn't believe in Jesus at all. And this brilliant God of light appears to him and he says, who are you, Lord? And he says, I'm Jesus who you're persecuting. Well,
Oh, wow.
Rajiv, this Hindu asks, who are you, Lord? And he said, out of the light steps a man with a white robe of light, with a beard and holds out his hands like this, and he says, "I'm Jesus, your savior."
Oh wow.
And he drops to his feet and says, "Namaste."
And he had no. The thing is, he doesn't have a cultural context to conjure that up.
No. And I'm showing this again and again and again all over the globe. A woman in Tehran, a Muslim imam in Rwanda, an Australian professor, several other Hindus from India, all over the globe. They are experiencing the same God, and they never want to leave his presence. And it's amazing. It's amazing. But back to our point, Rajiv also realizes that, there's this generational thing that tends to get passed down. And God wanted to heal him of that, but he had to let it.
That's right.
As long as we're just locked in, like, biggest, baddest bear in the woods wins. He's like, and this is the thing that we have to understand. God's MO is love. That is the point of it all. But we don't often understand the consequences of love. So you might fall in love with someone, but you can't make them love you.
That's right.
You can give them many, many good gifts, and they may hang around, but they might not love you at all. They might love the good gifts.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
You could put a gun to their head and say, "Live with me and tell me you love me." But we all know forced love is not love at all.
Of course.
But what we don't realize is it's the same with God. That when God created us, he, in essence, limited himself to interacting with creatures that he will not force, because what he created us for is love.
Can I ask you this? I think we all wrestle with this. I do as well. Why would he care? If he's the creator of the universe, right? Like, I look up, I live in sort of a little bit outside of Austin, sort of the last neighborhood that's still Austin, called Belterra. So we have this ritual. We come out with Deb, my wife, and we stare at the stars. And it's mesmerizing because it is, in its enormity, it makes us feel like nothing. We're a speck in all kinds of levels: physically, time span, lifespan, all of that, significance, even understanding grasping what this even is. We're nothing. We're close to nothing. We're but a mist, in the words of King Solomon. And to me, even as a believer, I find it hard to just understand and connect the dots. How does the creator of this care about me?
Because
I don't understand how that works.
Came from him.
That's right. Yeah.
Because you are, and this is the other thing that when you read these, and here's the other thing. I mean, we didn't even get into all the evidence for what convinced me as a skeptical engineer, that these are based in reality. Like, there's verifiable factual studies and things that base this in reality. But I interview CEOs, I interview commercial airline pilots, spine surgeons, bank presidents. These are people, what do they have to gain making up these crazy, wild stories of dying and meeting God?
That's right.
Hindus who meet the God of Jesus and now follow Jesus. Like Muslims who are now, now he's had 7 attempts on his life. This imam in Rwanda, because Jesus rescued him and he came back telling everyone about Jesus. So they don't gain anything. And to me, that's additional evidence that they're telling the truth. But the thing that that is astounding is, again and again and again, I quote them as saying, when I was with him, when I was in his presence, I've known love before, I've experienced love for a child, but I've never looked into the eyes of love itself.
Oh, wow. That's beautiful.
And that's what they say. It's like you get lost in his eyes. And then they'd say things, and again they would say, and I know this wasn't true, but I felt like I was the only one he loved.
Yeah, yeah.
Or
Uh-huh.
or
That's
another or another would say, you know, I would think about someone else, and then I realize, oh, he loves them like they're the only one he loves. And with every switch of my thought, I realized each one of us, he has a love for each one of us that is unique
that's
to
right.
each one of us, as if we are the only one. And
And
you
I
say,
think,
how can that be? Because we're so nothing. But that is how great God is. And that's what I'm trying to show people. And
yeah,
because it changes the way you live this life. When you realize how significant you are to the only one who really matters,
that's
it
right.
frees you then to be yourself fully and offer to the world your gifts, your talents, what you can do, but without all the stress and worry and burden, because you can't fail being you.
That's exactly how I feel. And I'm so glad you said that, because it, first of all, sort of the great commandment, love God, love others, but then it has this middle spot of love like yourself. If you know whose you are and how loved you are, that changes the way you treat others. Otherwise, you won't be able to treat them well. And then when you know that you're loved in that particular way, I think that's transformational. Every person you encounter, an employee, um, the the bum in the eyes of the world, right?
Yeah,
Whatever that is,
right.
a boss, a client, a partner, all of those people in the workplace, at church, people that you disagree with theologically, whatever, all of those things, right? The crazy uncle in your family, at Thanksgiving. If you experience love yourself and you have the practices to support that, so that you feel it rather than just think it,
Mhm.
you look at anybody else who is a potential irritant, and you start understanding they're loved, they're his, and they are loved just like you are. You can't treat them badly. You can't call somebody, this is a loser, this is a bum, and you can't.
Right.
It's impossible to judge, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that changes the way you do everything, doesn't it?
Yeah. Hey, Christian, my computer's about to die. Can we pause
Yes,
one
of
quick?
course.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. I
Yeah,
don't
that's
know what.
totally fine. This is live, and we're gonna keep rolling.
Well, it's plugged in, but it's not charging. I don't know why.
Oh, that's totally fine. I think I heard a little beep.
There.
There it is.
I don't.
Okay.
I don't know why it wasn't charging there, but okay.
I've
Um,
actually done like a live stream before with a friend of mine, and it actually died, so I didn't even notice. It was so embarrassing, and it was and I came back, and he was still on, and he didn't skip a beat. That's why that's a professional. He just kept talking about stuff, and I just sort of entered back into the conversation. It was really funny. So okay, so we were back on the treating others, and I guess my sort of, we need to wrap it up and land the plane here. My question to you is, how do we how do we keep that experience? How do we, first of all, become more aware of this more regularly? But also, how do we translate that into daily life? Because I really think what I just mentioned is that if you start treating human beings like you are truly are, who you truly are, you truly are, and others are, I think you can change the world in any area. I don't care if you're a pastor or an engineer,
yeah.
or a street sweeper.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things I was just listening to writing about this story of Erica, who in her near-death experience, God is there with her and shows her an image of shelves the size of the universe, and on every shelf is a gift.
Uh-huh.
And
Interesting.
he said to her, and she's a visual person, so it was like he gave her these visuals, and he said to her, Erica, when you were born, I gave you gifts. I gave you the gift of beauty, and I gave you the gift of patience.
Okay. Oh,
And he said, I give every person gifts, and if they
really?
if they ask, I'll give them more, but they have to be quiet and listen.
Oh, wow.
And she rebuked God. She said, oh no, you didn't give me the gift of beauty because, and this is fascinating, that is exactly where evil attacked her. So she was bullied growing up because she had dyslexia.
Okay.
And they would make fun of her, not only because of that, but also other things. And it caused her to become really self-conscious about body image. And she ends up becoming anorexic and getting addicted to diet pills. And that's actually how she had her near-death experience.
Oh, wow.
And so what, and God said, no, I gave you the gift of beauty and the gift of patience. And what she realized is that because she had not been seeking God's approval, she'd been seeking mankind's approval, it had taken the very thing God had gifted her with and twisted it against her.
That's right. The curse is the shadow of the gift.
It is. And so the answer then is to seek the one who made you and created you and has given you gifts to use for the good in the world. And it's in different realms. You know, some have been gifted to lead major corporations and provide, you know, services to mankind and to provide jobs to people. But you can't forget that how you treat people along the way of that is more important to God even than you doing great big things and having, you know, a
That's right.
company
Yeah.
go public.
Yeah. Oh, I think you're muted for some reason. I missed you there. Missed that last sentence, John.
Sorry about that.
There you go. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it's not an either or, you know, that you run this big corporation and you provide all these services and jobs for people, but you treat people like crud along the way. No, I mean, then in God's economy, you missed it.
That's right.
But on the other hand, it's not only how you treat people along the way. He's also giving you gifts and abilities and resources or positions to use for good.
I think so too. I say that all the time with my clients. You have an assignment, and the best thing you can do is to really, really find what this assignment is, because every single one of us has one, and then there's such freedom in that because no one can compete with you in being you.
Yeah. All right. So let me tell you one more because this is a good one about that.
Okay.
So Randy was a CEO, had an embolism, a pulmonary embolism, shut his body down, heart stops. He cries out to Jesus as he's leaving his body. He's taken up and he's there and he's feeling the hug from the side of Jesus and he feels his beard on his face. This is real.
Wow.
I know it's not.
That's amazing. It's amazing.
That's the thing that people don't understand. This is the less real. They say.
This is what we are experiencing now is
we're in the shadow.
That's right.
The real thing.
That's the real thing. Yeah.
And so he's walking with Jesus through this beauty and Jesus says, I'm going to send you back, beloved. And he's like, no, I don't want to go back. And he still had family and kids he loved and everything. But he said, and this is common, like, no, this is where I was meant to be. This is home. You know, I don't want to go back there. And he said, no, I'm sending you back. You still have a purpose to fulfill on earth. And that's common, what God says to them.
Right.
You still have a purpose to fulfill. So Randy's a CEO. He's 5-year plan, 10-year plan. You know, he's like, you know, that driven. And he said, okay, if I have to go back, then tell me, what's my purpose? What am I supposed to do?
That's right.
And Jesus said to him, no, I won't tell you because you'll get out ahead of me.
Oh, wow.
Moment by moment, I'll reveal to you your purpose.
Oh, that's beautiful. And probably maddening to the CEO.
Well, but it's also so instructive. And you know what, Christian? It's exactly what Jesus said his last night on earth. In John chapter 15, he said, just like a branch abides in a vine and
right.
grapes grow naturally, you abide or stay connected to me and you'll bear much fruit.
Much fruit.
But apart
Yes.
from me, you can do nothing.
You can do nothing. That's
now, we
right.
can do a lot apart from Jesus, apart from God, right? In the world's eyes.
Yes.
But the only way that we really live out the purpose we're here for is we learn to walk with him humbly throughout the day, asking, talking, listening. Some call it prayer, but it's just conversation.
It is.
It's like, okay, Lord, here's this person in my office right now. What do you want me to hear? What do you want me to say? What can
That's
I do
right.
for them?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, God, I've got this massive, supply chain issue in COVID, and I don't know how to solve it. And it's gonna cause problems for all these people. Show me. What can I do? What's the next right thing I can do?
That's right.
And in faith, you do it. And you'll be amazed at how God actually wants to do work with you. He cares about the things that you thought he didn't care about. He does.
And what would it matter to achieve all these things and gain nothing and not feel that love, that presence, right? The things that we pursue, the bad fuel. Oh man, I've seen it in my life. I've seen it so many lives. Is that, it's decades spent with bad fuel and not experiencing what you're describing right now.
And I think, the biggest thing to remember if you have lived down that road is that God is full of compassion.
That's right.
And what he did through Jesus was to forgive us of past, of present, and even future sins and wrongs. But also, he wants to heal us. He wants to heal those wounds that have been inflicted. He wants to make us, like you were saying, whole, where the motivation is that we're so grateful and we're so filled up with his love and peace and joy, the unburdened way of
That's
Jesus.
right.
Jesus said, if you're burdened and weary, come to me, learn from me, because I'm gentle and humble of heart, and I'll teach you, I'll give you rest for your souls. Mm-hmm. So you can accomplish a ton. Mm-hmm. But you can do it in a way that is unburdened when
that's
you do
a good
it
point.
with him.
Yeah. What would you recommend if we were to think of the person listening to this right now that is perhaps lost, hit at some sort of dead end, in life or work or both. It's usually a combination of those two things. Besides obviously buying the book, Imagine the God of Heaven, are there workshops, resources that you can point to that would help somebody get out of that funk?
Well, I think we've kind of talked about it. I think it starts with just realizing that God is already there with you, and he knows it all. He
That's
knows
right.
you better than you know yourself, but he doesn't force himself or his ways on you. So start to just ask him. Mm-hmm. And don't get impatient. Sometimes it takes time. And sometimes it takes time because he's got to get you ready for the answer.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're not ready for the answer.
Sometimes we're not even paying attention.
Sometimes we're not paying attention. And then the second is, to find a group. I call them spiritual running partners.
That's right.
I think it's what church is meant to be.
That's
where there
right.
are safe people who also live in the grace and the acceptance and the forgiveness of God, so they can offer that as people. The 12 steps, interestingly, really just come from biblical principles. And one of those principles is that you're able to be honest, not only with God, but with one other person fully. And it's a path of healing.
That's right.
And the scripture says, confess your sins to one another so that you may be healed.
Yeah. There's something there.
So I would say, find a good church, get into a small group. Not everyone will be safe. Not every person is experiencing the grace and the love and the acceptance of God. So they can't mediate it to others, but you can find it if you ask for it.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
think a good coach or a good coach or Christian therapist as well can serve you well at times. And then, you know, there are, I mean, at one point in my life, I worked the 12 steps.
That's right.
With other Christians through a church, because it's you know, it's amazing. It just takes you through kind of a moral inventory, but then it also takes you through a relational cleansing of
It
are there
does.
any relationships that need healing?
Yeah.
And you'd be amazed that once you just walk down that path, the thing that you felt was out of control or was dominating your thoughts or harming your life, it just kind of moves to the side because you got to the roots.
And you can be completely unburdened. You can be free. You can run on good fuel, and then you're free to actually do what you're supposed to do and be the gift that you are to all of us, to the rest of us here.
That's right.
And that's just what a beautiful thing. And what it's even more beautiful that it's not just, you know, like this inspiration, self-help type of stuff in the sense of just motivation. This is reality. This is more real than what we think is real. And that's what I love about your book, about your research, about your decades of experience and digging into that. And I think you bring so much value and so much. I mean, even I feel ministered to as I'm listening to you. And I'm sort of in this, you know, in this journey, and I go, oh yeah, that's such a great reminder. What a beautiful thing, and I don't need to stress out at all. And it's liberating. And
well, it's not from me.
That's right. Yeah.
It's from the Lord.
But it is your gift. That's what you're doing here on earth, and you're blessing thousands and probably millions. So thank you for. I really, really, really sincerely thank you for coming on, and I'm grateful that I know you, that we get to sort of connect every once in a while. And I really pray that your message spreads more widely into spaces that are completely unexpected and has sort of that ripple effect that you spoke about.
Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate it.
Thanks, John.